Hey guys, Justin here with Etherton Real Estate. I got Tom and Das here with the county. Going to talk to us a little bit of an update for the Montecito mudslide debris flow. So wanted to jump right in and ask you guys if you have anything off the top of your head you want to say first before we jump into a couple of questions about it. So,
well, I think it's been a real really change in the way that local people think about their priorities.
mm-hmm.
Right? That before the debris flow, aesthetic considerations was the highest political value
Mm-hmm.
in the community. And while that's still high, I think people have come to conclude that both safety and economic survivability
Mm-hmm.
are important priorities. And of course, the closer you were to the disaster, the more
Absolutely.
you feel that way.
Absolutely.
And we at the county are trying to reflect that prioritization
Mm-hmm.
and enable people to rebuild and to do flood control work
Mm-hmm.
that makes them know that they will be more safe in the future.
Absolutely, absolutely. Great. How about you, Tom? Anything?
Well, I think the one thing that it probably brought back to the surface is that we're vulnerable to some pretty
Mm-hmm.
tragic events here in Santa Barbara County and then in the rest of California. And this event was extraordinarily rare.
Yeah.
The confluence of having such an extreme fire
Yeah.
followed immediately by such an extreme rainfall
Mm-hmm.
is a rare event.
Yeah.
But the outcome of that is something that we can never forget
Mhm.
and not lose sight of, is that just because it's rare and a remote chance doesn't mean it won't happen, and when it
Yeah.
does, the ramifications are
Yeah.
just absolutely drastic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. What things have been done to improve debris flow, mudslides, things like that in the Montecito and county area here?
Well, in the most urgent sense, Tom's folks have gotten in there very quickly between every rainfall
Mm-hmm.
to clear out the debris basins.
Yep.
Right? So we have our first line of defense. I mean, they don't necessarily remove all of those, but if there's an impediment that won't move and will increase danger, they deal with that.
Okay.
And our biggest moves are looking to the future
Mm-hmm.
of how do we improve the flood control capacity of our watershed. Also in the short run, we are facilitating the debris net
Yeah.
projects, both through allowances we made it in permitting procedures and in terms of our advocacy and in terms of we are considering other moves that would help facilitate.
How many of those
debris
are
flows.
finished at this point?
4,
Four. How
and
many
they
more?
are hoping to do at least 2 more. They have permits for 11 total.
Okay.
Is that your
Yep,
understanding?
that
of it?
sounds right.
Awesome. And that's to help catch larger debris, boulders, and things like that.
And stop it up above our system.
Yeah.
So it's kind of first line of defense, second
Yeah.
line of defense.
Yeah. So it doesn't roll down the hill and
Yeah.
take out other houses or clog up the debris basins, anything like that.
So we, our next projects, we are considering in every one of the existing debris basins in Montecito, cutting a deep notch in those basins. Because one of the things that we discovered from this is that our one debris basin over in Gubernador Canyon performed better in that because it had a notch in it and let fine materials through, it was able to detain more rocks. And the rocks are obviously the most dangerous part
Damaging.
about this. So So Tom and our staff have made an application to FEMA for those funds. We have also made an application to FEMA to build a new debris basin on Randall Road.
Okay.
It is in the San Ysidro watershed, and to give you an idea of how much of an improvement that would be, the old San Ysidro debris basin has a capacity just under 10,000 cubic yards. This debris basin could have a capacity of around 50,000 cubic yards.
Wow.
So we could basically, by a factor of 6, improve our capacity in that watershed. The only difficulty to all this is that those projects collectively would cost about $40 million, and we have about $20 million to do them and to clean out the debris basins and the watersheds for the next couple years. So it's real, loaves and fishes time. Our first way to try to leverage that money is with our FEMA grant applications. Where they succeed, then that will be great. If they, where they don't, we will seek to partner with the community to get it done anyway.
Okay, very good. I was going to ask, what could the community do? What could people, if someone says, you know what, we want to help, we want to be part of it, what could they do to help out?
Well, some people already have turned over their land. Some people have also, one person has sold his land to us. That helps begin that project. The other is there has been a nonprofit formed for the purpose of charitable contributions towards these projects.
Gotcha.
And so they could contact me or Curtis Skeen, who's heading the effort from the community.
Okay, fantastic.
And I just add that I think we've seen what people have been doing in terms of, as Das mentioned at the outset, kind of a change in view on things where prior to debris flow, I can imagine what the response in the community would have been to some of these facilities, and now I don't think there's really any debate about, one, the need, and two, I think we've done a pretty good job of showing what the aesthetic outcome is of a debris basin. It really amounts to open space. 99% of the time there's nothing going on there, and there's vegetation growing in, and before we would do one of our cleanouts, I could probably drive you by it without telling you, and then ask you if we went by a flood control facility, and you probably wouldn't have even known. And so they do have a double whammy of providing some open space element to it as well.
Yeah, very good. But I wanted to know, being in real estate, how have there been any changes in building codes or other restrictions as a result of this event?
Yes, a temporary change. Two temporary changes. One is as a result of the FEMA flood elevation map. So we are not right now under a permanent one. We are under what's the term of art?
It's a recovery map.
Recovery map. So what that does is temporarily raises the elevation under which you need to build. That's good from the perspective of that it increases safety. The drawback, of course, is that in some cases it increases cost. What we have attempted to do is to do a second change, which allows people to rebuild without a discretionary review process. They get to rebuild without the cumbersome normal process that we have, and in order to accommodate the FEMA recovery map, they can move the footprint of their home where it would be, and still take advantage of what we call a like-for-like ordinance. as long as you're not building a bigger building than was destroyed, you can.
So the footprint is the same,
If the footprint's the same,
just another part of the property.
then you can rebuild without our normal, unfortunately, very long process.
Yes.
So if you know, the like for like ordinance allows people to rebuild without a more than a sort of advisory design review process, and without either the planning commission or being able to say no, right? And without neighbors being able to appeal the rebuild.
So would you call that almost, I mean, not officially, but kind of like rubber stamping it?
I wouldn't call it that, because we still make sure they have to adhere to building codes.
Correct.
And because those are health and safety things,
But
right?
it's an expedited process
That's
to
right.
get them through, because you're building the same thing. We want you back in your house.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think the imperative here is that many people's insurers, even though it's state law now that insurance has to cover 3 years worth of living expenses, back during the debris flow, some had policies that only were 2 years.
Yeah.
It means that come this January, people are gonna run out of their insurance being able to provide for living expenses.
Outside. Yeah, being
And
somewhere else.
so they've gotta be close to completion
Mm-hmm.
in some of these cases by that time.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the other impacts of the recovery map that Dot's mentioned too is we've had several people where their houses were destroyed. They want no part of rebuilding back at that elevation. And the importance of the recovery mapping was that it's a regulatory tool that would allow the county to require the elevation. So requiring the elevation does a couple things. One, it requires the insurance company to pay for the code, because they have to pay for code upgrades to current code standards. And then two, we are slowly going to rebuild a more resilient community, because the houses that were so tragically impacted are going to be higher. And because so many of these homes were built earlier in the century or the 1950s, early 1960s, new building methods and materials are stronger. Even in terms of the elevation, and even to the extent that some of the local architect groups have been working with individuals to look at, maybe you would reinforce the upstream side of your house with something other than 2x4s, because 2x4s, the rock's gonna win.
Yes. Does the elevation requirement then mean, if someone said, hey, we're gonna do 2 stories because we have 2 stories, does that mean they can't do the same amount they had before? Because you have a maximum height.
We do have a maximum height, and in one case there's been only one case of that that I know of. He was a gentleman that lives sort of right next to the freeway, so it actually wouldn't have impacted anyone's views. And he went to the planning commission for a variance, and I'm pleased to say that the planning commissioners I appointed unanimously granted the variance. And that's really important, because variances, for those of your viewers that know about these things, there are sort of exceptions to the rules, and they used to be tantamount to heresy locally. You would never get a variance. And I really feel like it's important for our planning processes to have some flexibility to allow people to rebuild. And so now he's being able to rebuild, and his family's gonna be able to stay here because of that.
Terrific, thank you. And we talked about insurance. I appreciate that. That actually segues very nicely into my next question. Have there been any insurance issues to ensure the house is moving forward? Have you guys?
Myriad.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm laughing only in a painful and tragic way. I mean, the good part is that there were some companies that serviced their folks well, and they're being able to rebuild because of it. The drawback is some of the same companies that serviced well are now saying we're going to pull out of Montecito. There are still some folks insuring folks. It's harder to find, it's caused a lot of hardship. And there are still people battling with their insurance companies over.
Is that something that really would be more of a state commissioner thing that would have to be taken up? One example is, I don't know if this is true, but I've heard that because they have to reinsure the property if it's been affected. They can't bail because they had a claim. But the house next door may not have been affected and didn't have a claim, and they're not getting insurance because all the houses around them are. And that's tragic because nothing happened to your house.
And they can't cancel you because of a claim.
Correct.
But they can. What they're doing is they're non-renewing, meaning once it expires,
Yep.
we're out.
We're up on that time right about now.
And and again, this isn't everywhere,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So most of Montecito is still very insurable, but it is it is in some of the more affected properties. I do think that part of the remedy is at the insurance commissioner's office, but I've looked into it. His formal powers, and right now it's
Yeah.
him, but his formal powers are real limited.
Okay.
The legislature could decide to give the insurance commissioner greater powers,
Okay.
which could help us in future events and in future issues.
Mm-hmm.
But his powers as they currently stand are limited. Sometimes, though, they can be informational. Sometimes they can be also embarrassment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Highlighting insurance companies that are really doing a great job and highlighting ones that are not doing such a great job. Montecito Association are also trying to work on advocacy to insurance companies.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of it is also sharing information with them that they may not know. They may just be looking at how much they're getting versus how much they're losing.
Yeah.
And the reality is, because of the scale of the fire, there's not going to be a whole lot of fires up there anytime soon. And the regrowth has been just perfect up there. And of course, we also have set up additional flood control capacity, and the Partners for Resilient Communities have set up additional flood control capacity. So all of these factors, I think, should get insurance companies and homeowners a little bit of peace of mind, and hopefully insurers will realize that Montecito is still a marketplace to be operating in.
Yeah.
And there are some things happening that should make it easier.
That's good.
We know insurers are not supposed to be using a evacuation map. That is not the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah.
But it may be
That
that they make some decisions based on that. And our Montecito Fire District, in conjunction with the county, are working to revise that evacuation map and factor in the regrowth that's taken place, factor in the additional capacity that's come from the debris nets, and that will mean that less properties are included at the next iteration of that mapping.
Well, and on that too, there's a transition going on between a lesser and lesser risk of a debris flow with the replacing it with the flood issue. There's still an ongoing flooding issue. We saw that last winter. While there was a lot of debris and material moving down, it wasn't rocks the size of this room.
No.
And we were able to get in, as Das mentioned, after each storm and do that. But the flood part of it, it's a different animal. It's not as life and property threatening. Certainly, flooding of your house is not a good thing, and we don't want that. But it's not the same as what we saw in the debris flow. It's magnitude different.
Absolutely. Okay. Good. That's good to know. And it's good to know to still be vigilant, not to be, hey, we're all done. It's the hills are looking green again because we've had great rain this last year. No, we're not out of the forest yet.
Well, and let's even remember that beyond, even after the fire, 1995, 1969, which although was a couple years after fire, there's still a remnant flooding threat to portions of Montecito.
Once we are in a better situation in the next couple of years, to me, there's still urgency. The urgency is to not forget.
Yeah.
In Montecito, unfortunately, every generation or so, there has been some flooding for the last several generations. We can make that less often if we create the right kind of infrastructure.
Terrific. Speaking of infrastructure, how is it going on the rebuilding of the bridges and roads? I mean, there were several knocked out and still out, if I'm not mistaken. How is that going? I mean, some are not just fixing, some are completely rebuilds.
Number one, the Caltrans bridges are mostly up, just one left.
Terrific.
And that one's very close.
Right.
That's good.
So that's good because that's provided a little bit of relief from traffic congestion for the community, and obviously a little better access. We are also replacing county bridges. There is conspicuously, one or two left to do, but we've got the Ashley Road Bridge done. We're looking at obviously Cold Springs along Mountain, but we have to, for that and for some of the road repair, we also have to realize that next season, we are going to have a whole lot of trucks going up and down again, because even if we are fortunate enough to survive, to not have another debris flow or flood, we will be running trucks up there to clean the debris basins with urgency after every storm. So that means there will be additional stress put on the main arteries. So that's one of the reasons why we will, it makes sense for us to do some additional repairs after we think there'll be less truck trips.
Okay. Well, thank you for that.
And that being said, I mean, as first district supervisor, I'm really happy with how much of the county's road budget has been being spent in the first district as of late. I really appreciate the patience of my colleagues on the Board of Supervisors, because normally it's supposed to be divvied up in a certain way, and lately we've been getting some additional allowances.
That's good to hear. And you got the whole county to take care of, but not the whole town. The whole county had significant road damage and issues with it, so that makes sense that we appreciate the rest of our county stepping in and helping us out. Speaking of congestion and roads and Montecito, which wasn't just affected in this, it was Santa Barbara as well. It's particularly commerce, small businesses on State Street, small businesses in the Coast Village, and being a small business owner and all of this, that's important. It's a big part of our economy. I guess what's being done to help bring the commerce back to the community, to help bring tourism back to Santa Barbara, Montecito? How is the office able to help with that and really, help everyone get back and going on it?
Well, the good news is that there's been some places that have fully recovered, at least according to their local business organizations. So Coast Village is doing as much business according to their association than before, if not more.
That's good to hear.
Our tourism numbers are epic.
Good.
There are some places that haven't recovered, and that's partially because there have been some issues beforehand, and this may have even exacerbated. State Street has not recovered. Right? And what's happening is a lot of dynamics there. One is that the energy of State Street has been refocused to Lower State and the Funk Zone. A lot of it is less energy going on in retail. In terms of jobs, that area has recovered. The loss in retail jobs has been made up for in terms of the growth of beer and wine jobs in the city of Santa Barbara. So that's good news. I would say there's still a lot of unexplored potential on State Street, and I really welcome the experimentation that the city is starting to embrace. There's some real visionary young leader that the city staff has spearheading it, and then the other is to learn from the lesson of other communities that have been able to reinvigorate their downtowns. I thought it was instructive when a representative from San Luis Obispo and from Santa Monica came, and they asked, how did you attract people downtown? And they answered, we didn't. We put people downtown. We built housing downtown. And I think that is vital for the reinvigoration of State Street, is to not be as dependent upon the fluctuations of tourism dollars, and to build housing that local people live in downtown, and also provide a permanent clientele for those business and those business districts.
Absolutely.
After a storm, I remember one storm, I forget which one, there were quite a few. We were digging out the debris basin by 10:30 that morning.
Wow.
And because
that
we
was $4 million just in the digging out of the basins.
yes, and creek channels.
Just from
Just
storm,
from those
Just
storms,
last year,
just those
yeah.
storms, and
and of course the year before that, the roads and the cleaning out the year of the actual flow was 120 million.
Wow.
And so we will be ready to do that again. We have everything in place to do that. And then looking down the road, the one thing that we didn't quite touch on in terms of the looking forward and the resiliency, we are looking to prepare some type of master plan of where we want to get to with improved channel capacity and debris basins. We have projects on the books right now, the existing debris basins that we want to modify and the new one. But there may be other things that are longer term that we don't want to lose this ability to remember what happened and try to capture that and put it into a plan for the future and do that. And part of that is the widening of Highway 101, where before the debris flow and any of this concern, we had Caltrans agreeable to increase the bridge size for 3 major creeks that go through Montecito: Romero, San Ysidro, and Oak. And so it does you no good to widen a creek channel midway up if the bridges on both sides aren't improved. So we want to come up with and it would be a long-term plan, because you just don't go out and replace 30 bridges in 5 years. No. But we want to come up with a plan to where, as things change and opportunities arise, we get to a better point every year, and that's how we have to go. We have to eat the elephant one bite at a time.
One bite at a time. That's right. No, this just happened. I'm scared. I'm worried. I don't want to buy there now. I don't want to turn there. Something, like what would you say to them about the future of Montecito, about what we've done in Montecito to make this a place to live again, to make this the Mecca again of the Central Coast?
Well, I would just say it's an incredible community. There's incredible energy. I would even argue it's an even better community than it was before, because literally the walls and fences came down between people. Yeah. It's one of the most beautiful places to live. I don't know any place in America that is immune from natural disasters. Yeah. Right? We live in a world where there are risks to live.
Yeah.
But man, this place has an energy, has a vitality. It's one of a kind, and I don't understand people who would think it's not the best place to live in the world.
Yeah, I agree.
I think if you look at it from maybe the engineering side, the most vulnerable properties have been basically wiped clean
Mhm.
some cases literally.
Yeah.
And those were individual structures that have built, some of them, I know of one that was from the 1800s.
Wow.
When these houses are rebuilt, and recognize that maybe not all of them will rebuild, but the ones that do be rebuilt will be rebuilt to standards and elevation requirements that will truly make the community more resilient
Mhm.
from, as I mentioned earlier, from an extraordinarily rare event.
Yeah.
But still, if we have another extraordinarily rare event like that at some point 60, 70, 100 years from now,
Mhm.
the results will be different.
Yeah.
And in the interim storms, as we make the improvements that we've talked about, the results will be different and they will be better. So in an ironic way, we're building a more resilient community.
Yeah.
It's an unfortunate way to have to do that.
Yeah.
But the net result is, particularly in the more vulnerable areas along the creek channels, we're gonna have a more resilient community.
Mhm. Absolutely.
And it, you know, even if people aren't just thinking about safety or aren't thinking about the spirit of the place, as what my other case, my bottom line case would just be financial, which
Yeah.
is, as a policymaker, if I could make housing in our community more affordable,
Mhm.
I would. In 20 years in working at this, almost nothing I can do makes it more affordable, right?
Uh-huh.
This community is so beloved, you know, that people still want to be here, and so it has only been in the very worst years
Yeah.
of the economic recession in
Yeah.
2008 and afterwards that home values went down here. They
Yeah.
chug along,
Yeah.
even when a lot of other places don't.
Historically, real estate goes up over the last 50 years. You look at the long-term trends, it's one of the best investments for long-term growth. And the beauty is, you always have to have somewhere to live. So people want to live here. Demand never slows down. Even in the downturn, when prices went down, there was still demand to live here because it's a beautiful place. Just a lot of supply. Awesome. Well, thank you, Tom. Thank you, Dos. I really appreciate your time. I think this will be very beneficial to everyone watching. And again, we really appreciate taking the time to chat with us.
Happy.
And we, of course, welcome anybody who has any questions to contact my office. Google Dos Williams, we're easy to find.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.